Hello. I am going to be talking about, based on my own experiences, temporarily working as a Clash dev, which happened from like a year ago to 6 months ago, essentially. After that, I wasn't active. I haven't even been unofficially on the team for over 3 months, so I haven't been a part of anything recent with Clash. It was only that fixed portion of time. And even then, what was going on was pretty limited in scope. It wasn't very dramatic. It wasn't a high player-based time for the game, so I didn't really end up getting my hands too dirty, essentially. But what that experience did show me and make me think about is the reason why I think Toontown servers in general, and for this we'll specifically talk about Rewritten, the reasons why it's so hard to actually make new content on a Toontown private server, and in some ways why I've gained more sympathy over the years for the fact that it actually is a kind of less trivial thing than maybe it seemed on first glance to me, and maybe the way that a lot of people have seen it. Not to say that I think Toontown Rewritten staff or developers have done a good job with their time, because I think they probably haven't, but I think there's a lot more understanding as to why it hasn't worked out compared to what I originally thought, and I'll explain what I mean. So, the first point I want to make is the amount of time needed to recreate the existing content, like a server of the existing content, a private server for a game, versus to actually make new content from what would be essentially scratch, especially if we're not just going to be recycling things. So what I mean by this is to just make a private server to get everything function with the source that existed there, to get everything just up to speed, essentially. That isn't a trivial task, but it's doable. It just requires, going through that. But to actually design your own stuff takes way more time, because you don't have these existing blocks to go off of. You're not just implementing what was there to begin with. You have to come up with new source code. You have to come up with completely new ideas, potentially. And of course, you can recycle some aspects of it to save time, but one thing that almost certainly ends up needing to be all new is the artwork, which also takes time and people to do. And the fact that it's just a lot more intensive when it comes to the hours it requires to make this new content. And I'll explain in some later points why this requirement of time ends up being more meaningful than it would be for, say, just regular comp size stuff. So another point I wanted to mention, which has already kind of been mentioned, but it's essentially that it's not just having a couple of good people on the team to get stuff pumped out. A lot of times you're going to need to work with different aspects, in particular, modeling, artwork, and game devs all together. So you need them to all be coordinated. You need everyone to actually be doing their job. If any part of that isn't working correctly, let's say that 1/3 of those people aren't doing their stuff, especially let's say the artwork's not coming out, it's really hard for the devs to do anything. Now, the Clash artists were actually phenomenal. I don't want to say that ever happened on Clash, but just the fact that you have to coordinate all these people and all these different, jobs or tasks inherently adds more overhead. I don't think it's maybe the most important factor, but it makes some difference. And so my next point that I think is maybe the biggest point, and what this whole video kind of ties into ultimately, is that let's say that you're a skilled programmer, you're a really bright coder, you are a young person, or let's say maybe especially college age, because that's the age you'd expect maybe most people to be, especially once they're good at programming, being college, is that let's say that you're a skilled college student and you want to do something like this. Well, ultimately, what you're going to realize is if you're real good at CS, that the conceptual complexity of doing something like this very well probably won't even suit you, because in college you have the option for internships, for part-time gigs of coding during the year. You have your classes, which are going to potentially be very useful. You have all these things that are much more important, let's say, towards getting a job later on. And let's say you've graduated college and you're just a skilled game dev. Well, you have an even bigger problem, because skilled programming jobs easily pay $100K or more, even starting in California. It's not that high in other places, but starting salary for these things is usually very high compared to the cost of living of whatever area you're in. You're going to be doing pretty well for yourself out of college. So what that means is that people who might otherwise be, really quick at doing this stuff, they might be able to knock it out super easily. They're just great skilled programmers. It's hard to get someone to just out of passion dedicate a substantial chunk of time to doing that unless it's on the side with their other job. And even then, that requires someone to be really passionate about Toontown to want to do this particular aspect of it, because it's not exactly the most conceptually unique or challenging thing. A lot of it's kind of grinding. So it's just a difficult sell. And the syntax is really undocumented in the source code. It's very messy. It's just very tedious and annoying. It's not like a magical thing at first, I would say. Not that like people shouldn't do it if they're like really passionate, and I think it's potentially like a really fun, engaging, rewarding thing. But just if you're specifically going for people that are going to be really efficient and good, it's not going to be easy to get these people to commit real time to it. And if someone isn't that good, they are probably going to be incentivized to spend their time doing things that are more applicable towards getting good than working on Clash or working on TTR might be. Just because of the fact of these financial incentives, CS is a very, like, there's a lot of incentives to, like, go all out on your summers, like working internships, a lot of incentives to get really good at these skills. And those things in particular really take away from someone's desire, ability, or resources that they could put into something like a private server to make that new content. And I think this probably isn't quite as prevalent for the artists, just because unfortunately there's not that same financial system in place. There's a lot more people that do art out of passion, and also there's just more monetization of the entire craft of computer science by far. It's a lot easier to get someone to do something for fun when they don't have in the back of their mind thinking, I could be getting $50 an hour for this. It's a weird phenomenon, and I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that this is definitely a factor, I think. Because this is why a lot of the, Clash TTR team, they probably have some people programming that are still in high school. And when you're still in high school, you're not going to be great at programming, but the fact is that no one but a high school student would probably consider this like the ideal optimal use of their time from like a logistical objective point of view towards moving towards like something, unless they very specifically want to work on game development in like of a similar style game to Toontown also. I could see that maybe, but even then a lot of programmers don't want to do game development because it doesn't pay as well and it's a lot more strenuous and grindy. So I think there's definitely, real people out here that want to do their best and are like very good fits for this type of thing, but it's not a perfectly easily accessible thing. It's not as easy as just finding people that are doing computer science that play Toontown. It requires a very specific type of person who has a lot of free time and a lot of like passion and doesn't have things that they're going to always put as like big priorities over this project. So, and then in addition, what also I think really ends up killing this is the fact that this isn't something organized by professionals. So not only is no one really getting paid, or if they are getting paid, it's not substantial. I guarantee you whatever, even if people at TTR were paid, which I don't know if they are, they're not getting anything close to market rate. But the simple fact that this isn't organized by professionals, no one's, a professional who's managing this stuff, no one's a professional who's developing this stuff or doing, even some of the people like doing the artwork or whatever. I'd say the closest people to like being professionals were actually the artists and the modelers that I've experienced. Those people seem to be like the most like prestigious at their craft, to be real with you. In some ways that makes me sad because it means that there's probably just not as many like good career opportunities for these people. But what I was going to say is that because this whole structural thing isn't by professionals, a lot of, even the people that are managers, the people that are like organizing this stuff, they're going to be younger, they might be less mature, they're going to have like a lot more problems when it comes to like the management structure of things. As pointless and useless as like managers in the professional work sound and how oftentimes they're just an annoyance, the fact is when you don't have any of that structure, it's really hard to get things done the same way. Like I know a lot about, for example, in software engineering, I've done some internships where they have stuff like the point system, they have like your tasks you're given, I forget what they're called. I haven't done an internship in a little bit. There's a very specific name for like a task you get each week. I think it's like there's like a sprint or something potentially. There's different like terminology, but essentially there's all this like logistical, organizational, like industry standard stuff for software. And you never see any of that when it comes to these servers because it's just not the same environment. And those things honestly do affect the end product and the efficiency so much. It's really hard to just, jump in, do whatever. And I definitely noticed that I was not given a lot of direction when I was working at Clash. I'm not saying that I'm blaming people. They had a lot on their plate. And that's probably how it goes for TTR too. It's hard to get the direction you need and be focused and oriented on specific things to succeed the same way as you would in like many other environments. So in conclusion, in addition to the fact that these teams are sometimes small or unqualified, just the overall, all these factors make me not surprised at all that essentially nothing gets done a lot of the time. And you don't really have these pushes for new content because it would require, people that are able to invest their time, make this private server their priority, be organized well, have these like clear tasks and objectives, and have nothing else going on, nothing better to do, and are good at what they do. And it sounds like a little simpler than it really is, unfortunately. And I think that you're always going to see private servers for a lot of stuff struggle to make new content. As far as I've seen, not a lot of private servers have greatly expanded the content in any genre. There's probably some counterexamples, and in fact, if somebody knows of a private server for another game, maybe like one of the WoW ones, maybe, I don't even know, Club Penguin, whatever, if you could find me an example of a private server where they've really put a lot of stuff out, I'd be very curious, because there might be some counterexamples. This is my current thinking based on some experience and also just some of what I've been around. And I would be really curious to maybe dive more into this. This is kind of, I think this has a pretty good explanation for some of why things have been less efficient, but it does not absolve the people, who are working on it of all responsibility. It's more of just like, these people aren't professionals, they're not going to be on top of everything, and they're probably a lot of logistical issues when it comes to getting the people you want, getting the organization you want, and for these reasons, I just wouldn't expect most of the time for there to be new content. Clash is definitely doing a good job to do everything they can to overcome these issues for the most part, I would say. No one's perfect. Some of the time I was there, things weren't perfect, but they have a much bigger team now as far as I'm aware. But even so, what I would say is that if you really want to get into one of these servers, you legitimately probably have an opportunity also. It doesn't take a lot to apply some of the time. I don't know quite how it is at TTR, but they need new talent. They're going to take chances on people to try to get things going. I guess that's also something worth saying as a side note. But yeah, coming through with all this is kind of why I've realized the harsh reality that things don't come through as much as I would hope they would, as much as most people would hope they would. It's nowhere even close to reasonable compared to like a real team getting paid like the big bucks who are probably experts in their field. So those are my thoughts. Thanks for watching. Got a little rambly at the end, but I'm just going to leave it, and I will catch you guys next time.